to a different part. You guys have gotten really good at analyzing text. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at text-dependent questions. These questions help guide close reading, and you're really starting to understand what that means. So let's look at our learning target to determine what we're going to talk about today. Lisa, could you read that for us, please?
Certainly. I can describe the instructional strategy of close reading.
All right, let's unpack this a little bit. Any of these words that we're not 100%, you're all educated professionals. When we look at instructional strategy, we're just talking about how we're going to do this. Could someone give me their ideas of what close reading means? Because you've had today to work on it. Yeah, Shauna?
Well, it means kind of what it says, to read closely.
Okay, and how do we read closely? How have you guys been, when you were looking at the Vietnam Wars packet, how did you read closely in that?
I kept a pen in my hand.
Okay.
And I did three things pretty frequently. I underlined words that I thought were crucial to understanding or made a point that I agreed or disagreed with. I did kind of a dialectical notebook approach where I put stuff out in the margin to restate or frame a question. And I also used it to, I love making parentheses. So when I could find two things that I thought related, I made a parentheses and drew arrows.
Oh. Wonderful, wonderful. Did anyone else have a different idea of how they were doing close reading?
That sounds pretty similar to what I do marking up the text.
Marking up the text. Now, and then when you answered the questions, did anyone have to go back to the text to be able to answer some of those questions when we were doing that graphic organizer?
Absolutely.
Every single
All right, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about text-dependent questions. I'd like you to grab out of your binder, right after the yellow sheet, is this text-dependent questions pamphlet by Douglas Fisher and Nancy Fry. When you're reading this, what I'd like you guys to do is I would like you to find the main points. Find things much like you did with the Vietnam Wars. Get the gist of what they're really trying to say to you. And then we'll come back together in about 5 minutes to be able to share out some of those ideas that you guys have. Can anyone repeat to me what I'm asking you to do for this pamphlet?
I can. You want us to skim it and find the main points.
Wonderful. Let's give ourselves about 5 minutes and then we'll come back together.
And are we doing time lapse here?
Wonderful. Thank you for reading so eloquently during this time, and you guys really took advantage. Do you have any ideas about what were Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry trying to say to us? What do we know about text-dependent questions, TDQs, that you guys would like to share? Maybe you could think about what was some things you underlined, or what was the gist of what these authors were really trying to say to you. Shauna, yes.
Well, I circled figure 1 here because
Great point. I forgot to bring that up. That's a great point. That graphic is awesome. Let's all look at that with Shauna. Why did you circle that?
Well, because it really, because I'm a visual learner, and it really just brought it home. Like, I get that. I can get it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that has a lot of great things in it.
Yeah,
and for
the
visual learner,
says a lot in a concise space.
You're right, exactly. And then for those that would really rather have the actual wording of it, there's the definitions on the other side, which kind of help us to place questions into their different categories. But we know that questions can go into multiple categories. So we're seeing here that maybe some of our questions might go to different areas. Anyone else, what did you notice in this article? What were some of the gists that you had looked at?
Well, I just like the idea that that it forces readers back into the text to answer questions. That speaks to the rigor of this exercise.
Wonderful, and we talked about that before we read them when you guys were talking about close reading, about how we had to go back. So now, as a way to be close readers, these text-dependent questions, that when you guys are in your classrooms, you're going to be creating these types of questions, all these different viewpoints of questions, and those questions are going to force the readers to go back to the article to understand what they're reading. So you brought up a great point. You guys have lots of great ideas. Let's look at this keynote up here, this PowerPoint, and look at this slide. And let's go over what it says, what it helps us to realize. Can someone read the first one for us? What do we know about text-dependent questions?
They require evidence from the text, which ensures students actually read the text.
Wonderful. For some of those kids that just want to answer, they don't have that choice anymore. They have to look into the text to be able to. Great point. The second one. Shauna?
Can refer to either part of the text or the whole text.
So, great point when you're thinking about going into just one little area or being able to go across the whole text or sometimes multiple texts. So, being able to give your students a lot of information. The third one there.
That they require different types of knowledge, general understanding, details that are important. And that's also, I don't know if I agree with the word versus, but in addition, I would say inferences and opinions. So it's really a hierarchical approach to thinking. It follows critical thinking formats.
And I think the way you're explaining it talks about this illustration perfectly. It kind of says, and when you're talking hierarchical, it talks about exactly what we're looking at here. So very good description of that, even though you weren't meaning to. What does the last one say?
Are often sequenced to support learning.
So we're not just giving kids an article and saying, here, read this, and they're going to get out what they get out of it. What we're doing is we're giving them questions to be able to say, this is what we need you to come to. We need you to get here. And so now what we're going to do is, earlier today we read the Vietnam Wars, and we did some questioning, answering text-dependent questions, whether you knew or not, on helping us close read. If you could get out this graphic organizer that looked like this, it was two different groups. Jigsaw A read Life, Liberty, and Ho Chi Minh, and the B group read The Fall of the French. What I would like you to do is I would like you to look at those 4 or 5 questions, depending on what group you're in, and I would like you to determine either from this illustration here or the definitions on back or a combination of both, what kind of questions you feel these text-dependent questions are. And if you could give them a category, and sometimes, like we talked about earlier, multiple categories of how they would fit in. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to get this done. Shauna, could you tell me what I'm looking for in these next 5 minutes for you guys to do?
We are supposed to label the types of questions on the jigsaw that we had yesterday, whether we were group A or B.
Wonderful.
I didn't realize there were 2. That's pretty cool.
There are 2.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. We separated the whole group, all 40 of you, into different groups. And you can use this. Remember to look back at the text, because that's what good close readers do to help you answer those questions. Wonderful. Get started. You guys have done an awesome job in looking at what kind of text-dependent questions. Let's just review that quickly and kind of look at what we think and see if we have other people that are agreeing with us. Let's go to Life, Liberty, and Ho Chi Minh. The first question, what category do you feel that the first question could be placed into? And let's talk about why also. Christoph, could you help me out?
Sure. So I labeled this as a vocabulary question.
Okay.
Because it asks us to use vocabulary words to explain what happened.
Okay, so it kind of says it right in there.
Kind of gives it away a little bit.
Yes, definitely. Does everyone agree with that? Just a nod of the heads, or wonderful. Number 2, let's look at that one and determine which kind of question you think text-dependent question that one is. Shauna, yes.
The details one, because it uses the word details.
Okay, so it uses the word details. Does anyone feel that maybe it would go under a different one, or does everyone kind of agree that details would be the one that we're looking at there for question number 2?
I think it is exactly about details, but I think it's helping scaffold students to think about what those details reveal about him. So it's how the chart said sequencing questions. It seems to me that that's starting to build towards some deeper understanding of the personality.
And Lisa, look at what you did. You were just being a wonderful closed reader, going back to your text and referencing that to a question I was asking you. Nice job. All right, let's continue on a little bit. Number 3. What do we feel when we think about this illustration or the definitions? What we're looking at for number 3, to paraphrase what Ho Chi Minh. I think the main word for me that stuck out for me would be paraphrase. Did anyone else feel that paraphrase was helping us understand?
I did.
Yeah, and Lisa, what did you think we needed to say for that? What kind of question?
I thought it was a general understanding.
Okay.
And I think it came out of question 2, because when you understand what he looks like and his personality, you get a clearer understanding of how he set his goal.
It's characteristics.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Shauna?
You know, I know, I keep hearing the word hierarchy, but I don't think this is a hierarchy.
Okay, why not? Can you tell me more?
Because maybe I don't understand hierarchy. So that could be part of my differing opinion. But, you know,
tell us why you feel
general
that way.
understandings, if paraphrasing what he wanted is about general understanding, I mean, I think that takes some serious thinking.
Okay.
Versus, you know, a lot of times we think just learning a new word is a little less you know, complex thought.
Let's go back to
So-
Lisa and let her kind of talk about why she thinks it's a hierarchical for a second.
Well, I'm going to go to the other side of the chart for a minute, Shauna.
Yeah.
And I do think that you get a word, you put words in sequences, that makes a sentence. You put sentence in sequences, that makes a paragraph. And to me, that is a hierarchical function. The same thing my brain does with segments, then an entire text, and then multiple texts. So these are degrees of complexity or incremental degrees of structure. And then when I look at this one, it's not, I agree with you, it doesn't seem as hierarchical to me, but in some ways it does. If I don't have a general understanding, if I don't get that first step, I'm pretty likely to have my opinions and arguments maybe not be as well formed if I didn't understand what I read.
Right.
So the research I did on critical thinking makes me see this as somewhat hierarchical, even if the questions aren't set up in that order all the time.
Interesting.
You seem to kind of be an expert at that critical thinking.
No, I'm not an expert at anything.
We established that.
Yeah, we know that already.
Shauna, does that help your thinking?
It helps my thinking. I do not agree.
And is
it
that
helps my
okay?
thinking. That's totally okay.
Yes, it's definitely
Yeah.
okay. The thing that we're looking at for text-dependent questions,
Learning community, I'm loving it.
exactly, we're looking that they refer back to the text. We're looking on depending, as it says in the title, depending on the text. So if you feel a little differently, that's okay. And I think it's really good that we realize that there's a lot of these in here. And I know we said it before, but you could have a question that addresses more than one of these.
Yeah, great.
Let's go.
Yeah, and may I say one more thing to
Please.
Shauna?
Cool,
So Shauna, I'm not sure that it matters that people think of it as a hierarchy, but it helps me think about
Helps
it.
you, yeah,
And
right.
I see evidence for why I think
Yeah,
that way.
that makes sense.
Let's go back to our learning target for a second and think about, I can describe the instructional strategy of close reading. What I'd like to know from you guys is how could we use these text-dependent questions to help us define close reading? You just worked with text-dependent questions. How does that help us describe close reading?
It shows us.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
Lisa, go ahead.
It shows a way into the text.
Okay.
And if you're looking at something closely, that's the surface level. But when you start to raise the questions, you actually enter the text.
Wonderful. I think Christoph had said it before. You're forcing the reader to go back into that. Shauna, what did you want to add?
I think that sums it up.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a thermometer. We're going to do, if you really think you're understanding text-dependent questions, how they help with the close reading, let's give it a thumbs up. If you're a little unsure, kind of give it thumbs to the side. If you would like to, you know, maybe understand more, meet with me a little bit, let's do a thumbs down. Could you guys show me your thumbs? Awesome. Well, thanks. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back to our last learning target.